Good evening all and welcome. Tonight I have a collection for 20 ghost stories for your listening pleasure. Be sure to subscribe if you're new here for new videos 3 times a week. And don't forget to download our app for over 3,000 additional scary stories to listen to at your leisure. But for now it's time to get comfortable and let the darkness take control. I was an atheist. I hated how invested my family was in religion, so I rejected it with full force. It was about 3 p.m. in Colombia, sun shining everywhere inside the house. Homes are built this way here. I'm sitting on the kitchen counter talking to our housemaid. She's facing me and I'm facing her, when all of a sudden a shadow runs from one end of the patio to the other in the living room. Brushing off my skin as if it were heavy air, the shadow was tall and floating, and I got the sensation it was a male, but I can't explain why. I look at her, waiting for her to say something, and she goes, "Did you see that?" "Yeah, did you feel it?" To make matters worse, I found out a child that used to live there had died. We would hear children playing, but never saw anyone outside. And that was the day I started believing in spirits. A few years back, I also contacted the maid that was with me that day, just to make sure and confirm that I wasn't crazy, and she confirmed and retold me the story without me giving her any details, so I know it was real. There are several instances that occurred in the house, but that was the most unidentifiable one. Allegedly, the car died in a child accident 2 blocks away from the home. His father's best friend ran him over by accident. Talk about tragic. I have a friend called Rebecca. Mutual friends of ours have always told me that she's haunted. Not her house, not a mysterious urn that she keeps or something. Her. I've heard stories from her boyfriend about times that she stood outside ringing her doorbell and knocking for an hour, because she's trained herself to just ignore it. I was hanging out with her on her bed, and thought I honestly can't remember what we're doing. It wasn't anything naughty. Her back was to me and she was laying on her side, and I was on my back staring up at the ceiling. I was closest to her bedroom door, which was closed, and it was just the 2 of us in her entire house. Suddenly, movement in my peripheral vision caught my eye, and I see a shadow silently creep along outside the door, blocking out the hallway light coming from the bottom. I very slowly turned my head to look at Rebecca, and she hadn't moved. Her back was still to me, so that she couldn't see what I was looking at. I looked back at the shadow and sort of tilt my head back and forth, thinking it's a reflection of some weird angle that's playing games on my eyes. Nope. This shadow is actually creeping along outside the door. When it gets a little more than halfway, Rebecca out of nowhere suddenly screams, "Becky, go away!" I almost snapped my neck to look at Rebecca, because she scared the absolute hell out of me since I thought she might have been napping. And she still had her back to me. I looked back towards the door and the shadow was already gone. I asked her what the hell was going on and she simply said, Just don't worry about it." And she drifted back into her nap. The next occurrence happened in the same apartment. I was sitting on the toilet when I heard my main door open. I creaked open the bathroom door because I didn't realize anyone was coming home at this time, and I just wanted to know who it was. My 2 cats were sitting right outside the bathroom and were staring at me. No response from whoever was opening the door. I thought I may have just been hearing things, but suddenly, a loud, drawn-out gasp comes from the main door area, which is in the living room. Both of my cats immediately look towards the living room and drop into runaway mode. I slammed the door closed, locked the door, finished my poop, and then just sat there for a good hour or so. I actually don't remember what happened after, as this was a while ago, but I do specifically remember that none of my family came home during that day when I asked them later on. I was in bed and for whatever reason, I started shaking ever so slightly. A vibration so subtle that I actually got up, held my breath, and thought that maybe breathing was causing it or something. I lay back down, and the shaking starts again. I pull the covers off myself and open the light, thinking that maybe one of my cats was locked in my room and was rubbing against the bed or something. Nope, it wasn't there either. I get back into bed and pull up my blanket. The shaking didn't start again, but I literally felt something crawl towards me on top of the blanket. I cannot stress how much I am not lying about this. If anyone has a cat or any other animal, and have had them step on you while you are under your blanket, that's pretty much how it felt. Except the stepping on area felt larger, almost like the size of a closed fist. It approached me slowly, seemingly avoiding pressing down directly on my legs. I didn't see what was going on or what happened after, because the next thing I know, I've just woken up and it's morning. I remember what happened the night before quite vividly, and though I was really uncomfortable, I wasn't exactly scared. I go outside to the bathroom and close my door behind me. The second my hand leaves my doorknob, I hear it shaking incredibly fast and then it just stops, like something was rattling it extremely hard. And then that was that. There's literally nothing else that happened. Years later though, while working in a theme restaurant, I met an actress who worked as one of the restaurant characters. The first time we ever met, she told me that she felt a really strange energy about me, like there's something following me around. I told her about my hauntings, which I actually do have a few more of, and she told me she was a Wiccan, which I had no idea was a thing at the time. The one thing she did say was that it didn't feel like a threatening energy, and that maybe it was a guardian angel of some kind, which is why I don't feel complete dread or fear when these things occur. To sum it up, I'm fairly certain that Becca must have somehow latched onto me instead, or I picked up something from Rebecca's place. I haven't spoken to her for close to 15 years, but now that I'm writing this all out, I think I'm going to reach out to her and see if she remembers anything about that day. When I was 10, I was spending the night at a friend's house, and my buddy and I were sleeping downstairs in the front room. This house had an old dirt wall basement cellar that none of the kids were ever allowed to go into, the entrance of which was a door in the hallway that connected the front room to the kitchen. At about 1 or 2 in the morning, I wake up to the sound of the door opening and closing, and I look in that direction and see my buddy's little sister exit the cellar and walk quietly towards the kitchen. Thinking to myself there's no way that my buddy's 5-year-old sister snuck downstairs to the basement and back again into the kitchen, I get up to go investigate. As I'm walking down the hallway, I can hear her shuffling around. I finally reach to where I can see into the kitchen and look directly at her. She's standing on her tippy toes reaching a large glass jar filled with granola bars. As she's pulling a granola bar out, I call her name. She quickly turns around on her heels and with a shocked look on her face, and I flip the light switch on. She completely disappears, and the granola bar falls to the ground. As you can imagine, I freak the hell out, run back to the front room and cover myself with blankets and don't sleep the rest of the night. By 7 a.m., my buddy's parents are coming downstairs carrying the little sister, grumbling that they didn't get enough sleep because she slept in their bed all night, and then proceeded to wake us up and scold us for leaving the jar of granola bars open all night. I used to work in a store built in a former World War II military hangar. I didn't think much of it until I went into a workspace that was the former ready room and saw some of the desks and counters were original. For some reason the hair lifted on my neck, and when I asked people working there about the area, they just shrugged and said it was haunted. Everyone knew that. And it was an eerie feeling, not creepy, but like being close but not in touch with an electric current. I always felt like time had bent on itself there, like the sailors were busy doing their jobs and so was I. They were nice though. I always spoke to them quietly when I was there. One time I was looking for some tiny repair parts with no luck and I finally asked, "Hey guys, can you help me?" I walked around the table where I had just been to find a bag full of those parts sitting there alone. I said a nervous thank you and fled. Another time I was doing inventory alone when a baby doll 2 hours away out of the blue asked, "Will you play with me?" I told it I was a little busy, but then decided it was time for a break. The present scared a lot of people worse than me, but it was pretty awesome too. when you think about it. I only climbed up to the top of the tower when a frightened co-worker asked me to go with her, as it was just used for storage. At the top I didn't feel the presence as much as I did in the old ready room. Down there they had hung a curtain over a window that had once looked out to the hangar floor. With the interior shelf of the store in place, the window now looked into an attic of shadowy shapes, and no one wanted to look there too long. Still, I hold that there was no sense of evil, just the constant tingle saying you weren't alone. It was a cool space full of history, including a stairway banister covered with intricately knotted sailor rope work. I've had a few paranormal incidents myself. Something touching me just a few weeks ago, something saying my partner and my name in our ears one night was pretty disturbing. However, the freakiest thing I've heard is from my mother. When she was younger, she lived with her best friend in a 2-story house that was sectioned off into 2 living spaces. They lived upstairs and an old lady lived down. They said that from the beginning everything just felt off. Anyway, their key cards kept going missing every few weeks. They would get new ones and the same thing would happen again. They said every night at around 1 a.m, if they looked out the windows into the backyard, there would be a man in all black with this huge, wide-brimmed hat on. He would just stand there and stare up at them and then vanish. After 6 months, they both decided to move out. They went back to make sure they had all of their stuff and opened one of the drawers, and there were all of the lost cards. That night, someone broke into their house and robbed and killed the old lady. My mum thinks the ghost of whatever it was trying to get them out of there just in time. When I was a kid, we moved into an old, small house for rent. We were dirt poor that time. Right beside the house is a closed space. Like it was empty, but for some reason, it was all boarded up with scrap and plywood and you couldn't see what was inside. When we could finally afford to rent that space a year later, we found animal claws and fangs and old herbs inside. We cleaned that space in the span of a day, and my parents decided to convert it into a small church. Guitars and drum sets were donated to us by kind strangers, and my mum was pumped up to invite all the neighborhood kids the next day. But that night, while saying grace for the meal, I remember my dad praying, "God, cleanse this place from evil spirits." And we all heard a loud shriek/growl followed by a crashing noise. My mum was seated where she had a view of the door to the place. I saw her just standing at something in that direction, while Dad finished his prayer. Then we all went outside to check it out. While the drums were scattered on the ground like they were carried and thrown down. All the windows and doors were locked, so no wind, no animal could have done that, if even they were strong enough to push over such a heavy drum set. I remember because I triple-checked all the locks on the windows, trying to act tough around my dad. When we returned to the table for dinner, my mum said that while we were praying right after the noise, she saw a dark figure that loomed at the door, angrily pointing at her and shaking its head violently, which vanished when we said amen. I slept beside my parents that night. Do doppelgangers count as ghosts? Because my wife's friend used to tell her that she always used to see her doppelganger in their dormitory back in college. My wife says that when they do, it's always a stressful time in her life. Like she'd be in class worrying about exams, but her roommate would see her walking out of the CR in their room and then lie down. Then she's gone when her roommate tries to talk to her. One night we drove out to a friend's backyard wedding, but we were fighting. It was a point where we both wanted out, tired of constantly arguing. It was ironic, attending a wedding like that. I parked in a well-lit spot, empty seat, and walked away to catch a bit of air. I looked back and saw her outside the car, then walking in the opposite direction towards our friend's house. I looked away, pissed, then walked back to the car to drive away and leave her behind. The doors were locked. I peered inside and she wasn't there. The keys weren't there either. I started to run after her, but suddenly the car opened and she called out to me. I was confused, asking her how she did that. She said she was also puzzled why I was circling and peering inside the car as if I were looking for something. I saw you walk away, and I wanted to get in. Idiot, I was in the car the whole time watching you. We just sat in the car in disbelief, and she told me it must have been a doppelganger, but I don't know how that works. When I was 7 or 8, I was visiting at my mum's house for the summer. My stepsister was around 11, and I shared a room with her. To set the scene a bit, we had 2 doors into our room, one that leaned into the doorway off its hinges to a hallway, and the other was so low it had to be dug into the ground. We each had a twin bed with a window between us, a vanity near the scraping door, and a closet to the right of the leaning door. I had been asleep for a bit when my stepsister wakes me up calling my name, telling me to get over to her bed. I grudgingly get to her bed, and she says she saw a black figure at the foot of my bed. I didn't see anything, but after a bit of looking and hiding under the blanket, we look over to the vanity where we had placed a set of glowing stars in the shape of a smiley face. It went from all glowing to exactly half glowing. It was as though something had stepped in front of the stars, and it felt like forever, though I'm sure it was only a minute or 2 until it started to glow fully once again. We knew no one had entered our room, as neither doors had moved. We are both now screaming for my brother that we think is home, and his room is down the hall, but he wasn't in. At this point, my stepsister is feeling faint by being under that blanket for so long and screaming. She tells me I have to go across the room and turn on the light, as she's too weak to do it. I somehow got the nerve to leap from the bed and run across the room to the light switch, knowing she wasn't going to no matter what. None but the 2 of us were in that room. After I sat down and stepsister had calmed some, our door opened to my brother, asking us what happened, as he was with friends under our window. We slept with the lights on for a good month after that. Another is there are 3 ghosts where I work. Very few say they've seen them, but us long-time workers know about the angry woman, the little boy and the old man in the flannel. Well, I was walking by a table once, when I felt someone grab my shirt, but loosen their grip as I took a step. I turned to see what the person needed, but no one was there. Looking around, the closest person was 15 feet away and behind a table. I know it was one of them. I was about 8 months pregnant, and my great-grandfather, who had raised me as his own, had just passed a week prior. I was having a hard time accepting that reality. One day I'm sitting at my kitchen table that faces down a long hallway into a bedroom, and I'm home alone. I glance up from my food, and down the hallway, standing in the hall, is a tall, skinny figure roughly my grandfather's build. I had to do a double take, because I couldn't believe what I had seen. I felt this overwhelming calmness come over me, and a peace I hadn't known since before my grandfather had passed. I get chills remembering it, but I knew it was my grandfather coming back to tell me it was okay to be sad, but that I needed to move on, because he was happy, and wanted me to be happy as well. I know he wanted me to know that, because the feeling, coupled with the thoughts, "I'm happy, why aren't you?" popped right into my head. I've had several encounters with spirits since, but that was the time that I really accepted I have gifts I've been ignoring my entire life up until that point, and it helped me accept them. There was another time when I was babysitting my nephew, just him. I was alone, laying on the couch watching a movie which faced directly into the kitchen doorway, where said hallway and room were directly off, and my nephew stops and goes, "Who is that?" I thought he meant on TV, and I told him the character, but he says, "No, who's the guy in the kitchen doorway?" And me at this point in my life was still very much in denial, and stared directly at the TV, refusing to look over, and said, "It's no one, don't worry." I tell him, "You leave him alone, and he will." And he did, and he says, "Okay, he's gone now." He said sorry. My nephew is 7. I'm pretty sure it's my gift and that it's running in the family. My daughter is also extremely sensitive to spirits and such. She's 9. That's a part of my life I hadn't talked with her about yet, so that she can organically come to me with it. And I was shaken. I used to live in an old house in rural Wyoming. My mum and I had a couple of shows we would watch together every week. We were sitting on the couch that faced the wall with the TV on it. To the right were a couple of windows and a couch that was empty. Simultaneously, we both jerked our heads to look at the window. The drapes that covered the window had been stuck on the couch, and in one swift motion, they were pulled back to straight and almost took the whole rod down. We were both very uninterested in ghosts and far from believers, but after years we still try and come up with a rational explanation other than paranormal, and have yet to be successful in our endeavor. I was in student housing at the time. I had a double room to myself in a shared apartment. Being wary of people coming into my room, I had set up a PS3 camera as a motion-activated security cam that recorded to my PC when it detected movement. I get home one night after school and see that it had been triggered, so I scout the room, checked cabinets, bathrooms, closets, etc. The closet door itself was difficult to open and close because it had dropped, and so you had to lift it to move it, so I forced it back closed. I sit and watch the video to see the camera was triggered by the closet door opening by itself. I stayed at my then girlfriend's room for about a week after that. A couple of buddies and I were driving to hockey practice one morning, and this lady in all white started crossing the street as we were getting to the green light. Initially I was angry. She got halfway right as we were getting to the light, resulting in me slamming on my brakes, and literally right after I slammed on my brakes, a truck ran the red light. We would have T-boned and probably been killed if we hadn't have stopped. Friends asked how the heck I knew to stop, and why I stopped. When I told them about because of the lady, they were just like, "What lady? We never saw a lady in the crosswalk." I'm pretty sure a ghost saved all our lives. I was sleeping in my sister's bed when I was 10, and right next to the bed hanging up on the wall was a cork board where she tacked all of her pictures. It was around 2 a.m. when I woke up to a noise and several pictures falling off the cork board. It was weird, and I was kind of spooked, but I didn't think anything of it. A few minutes later, I was trying to fall asleep when every single picture started flying off the cork board like a tornado was in the room. I don't think I've ever jumped out of bed so fast and ran into my room. I never found out the cause of it, what made the pictures fly off, but it always weirded me out thinking about it, because they were tacked to the board hard. Ghosts, do you think? I used to live in a flat with my 2 boys, and the smallest bedroom was my youngest son's. He used to tell me he had bad witch dreams, and to be honest, none of us really felt comfortable in that room. On this one night, my boys were around 6 and 4, and I was settling them both down in the eldest's room for the night. My mum and friend were also in the flat, in the kitchen which was over the other side of the flat. I heard a bang in the hallway outside the room, and my dog yelped. I thought she'd walked into something, so I didn't go out straight away. When I did go, I got to the hallway, just as my mum and friend came in. My youngest had an old, heavy chest of drawers in his room, along the door wall about halfway down the room, maybe 6 feet from the doorway. On the hallway floor was the bottom drawer. I assumed it had hit or surprised my dog, which is why she yelped. We looked to my youngest's room door, and there, directly across the doorway, was the chest of drawers, like something had been used to barricade the door so no one could enter. We all looked at each other, and were each just as freaked out as the other. My mum and friend swear they hadn't moved them, and they were both together the whole time, and my boys were with me. My mum still to this day says how there was no possible explanation for what happened, and I still get goosebumps whenever I think about it. I once visited my dad for the summer when I was around 13. He was house to house at the time, and this time he was renting this older house. I felt uncomfortable in there, but I thought I was just being paranoid. I've always been a night owl and struggled with insomnia, and one night around 2 to 3 a.m, I'm sitting up watching South Park on my laptop. Great choice. My door is open, and I can't stop glancing into the kitchen and the dim oven light, when all of a sudden I hear the most uncomfortable, blood-curdling scream I've ever heard. It was a woman screaming, and it was loud. At this point I'm crapping myself, but my dad was always like, "Be a man up," type guy. So I shut my door and don't sleep till daylight. I never say anything to him, and about a year later I'm going to visit him again and I say, "Remember that house you lived in on such and such street? I had ghost screams there." He turns white as a ghost. He says every day he would shower, pee, then go to work. Being a single man, the toilet seats were never put down. But every day without fail, he got home and the damn toilet seat was down. It never went down while he was home. He went as far as pulling over, opening up his camera roll and showing me the time-stamped pictures of his toilet seat up at 7 a.m. and down at 4 p.m. as he got home. He said the rooms he kept his firearms in would constantly be shut somehow, and remained extremely cool for Texas in the middle of summer. My family has a whole bunch of energy attached to it. I say that because no matter where we live, either as a group or separately, there always seems to be little odd things that happen, which get more and more frequent the more we lived in this house. The house I grew up in, for example, I would hear my sister's guitar being played when no one else was home, or I would put some weed in my pipe and place it on the bedside table, and spend a second or two looking for my lighter, and then when I'd go to grab my pipe, the weed is gone from inside and never to be seen again. It's not like it was a rounded pipe either. It had a flat bottom specifically to stop spillage. My mum's keys went missing for months, only to fall out of a heavily used coat rack some 6 months later. Just fell on the floor out of nowhere. We had a little converted shed in the garden with its own deck. But it was my room for a while, and every night I'd hear someone stomp up onto the deck with big boots and clump around for 5 minutes before vanishing completely. We lived in that house for 20 years before deciding to move, and when all of our stuff had been taken out, it was like the sun finally shone on the walls for the first time. It was a total shift. We lived in our current house for 6 years nearly, and things were only starting to ramp up. The other night someone was fumbling with my doorknob, even though we live on the second story and can hear anyone who walks up the stairs. We've seen shadows darting up the stairs, and my nephew has seen a man hanging around more than once. First time he walked into our walk-in pantry and immediately screamed and burst into tears. When he finally calmed down, he said there was a big man in there who scared him. The second time, a few months ago, he went into our dining room to go outside and play, then came back and ran to my mum, his nana, and said the big man was back. She went with him and saw nothing, but he was adamant that he was still there. I was 11. Our house was built in the year 1900. The second floor, from left to right coming up the stairs, goes like this: brother's bedroom, bathroom, my bedroom, my sister's. It was around 2 or 3 a.m. I don't know why I woke up. We didn't have the best doors. They weren't solid wood. They were hollow, crappy, thin wood, probably MDF. I heard a really light knock on my door. 2 of them. I thought perhaps someone was going to come and tell me to turn my TV off or something. 10 seconds later, 2 more knocks, a little louder. Then I heard it on my sister's room door, and then, just barely on my brother's as well, all within 10 seconds. This happened another 3 times, each getting louder, and I'm freaking the hell out at this point. It happens one more time. Sister's room to my left, brother's room across from mine, bathroom to my right, and then it pauses for about 30 seconds. I thought it over, but I'm still freaking out. Then on my door I hear boom, and my door shook. All throughout this, I heard no footsteps, no voices, nothing. I stayed awake staring at my door until sunrise. I was scared out of my mind and wanted to make sure I wasn't dreaming. To this day, I still have no idea what exactly happened. I was doing a paranormal investigation in the old jail in St. Augustine. This place is known to be the most haunted place in the entire city, as back in the day, the only people who got jailed there were rapists and murderers. A lot of them even had to build their own gallows and get hung from it. There was a total of 9 hangings there. So during this investigation, we were given all the equipment we needed. Recorder for EVPs, dowsing rods, etc. And I had a bunch of events happen to me that night. I was always one to be obsessed with the paranormal and respected it fully, so I've always had this connection I felt. Our group was sitting at this long table in between all the cells, and we were asking the spirits questions. I remembered the lead investigator ask, "Who do you want to talk to at this table?" No exaggeration. Every single one of the rods every person was holding all pointed to me at the exact same time. It blew my mind, and I got pretty excited rather than scared. Next thing is I went into the sheriff's office inside the jail. Him and his daughter lived there, and I asked the sheriff if he was still in the room with me, and to point my dowsing rod to where he was located. At this point, I was sitting in his office chair, and there was a guy watching cameras and saw an orb fly to the left of me after I asked that. Then all of a sudden, the rods both turned directly to my left. I also ended up having a conversation with his daughter in the room. I was completely by myself sitting on the floor of her room, asking her questions like, yes or no? Do you like my company? Do you want me to stay here and play with your toys? And every single question I asked her, she answered back with the dowsing rods. Cross them for yes, turn them away for no. And sure enough, they'd either cross or move away with no breeze, no movement, or anything. It was one of the strangest and coolest moments of my life. When I was 8, my sister and I shared a room on our first floor. Our bedroom door sort of led into the kitchen. My sister had this monkey clock that I looked at every morning to gauge how much more time I had left to sleep in. One morning at 7:20ish, I woke up and rolled over to look at the clock. In my groggy gaze, I got the time, but then who I thought was my dad moved in front of it. Now at the time I remember seeing a dark figure with no visible features like pure black. I did not think anything of it since I was just waking up and assumed it was just my tired eyes. Seeing this, and yes, I made note that I did, I started to rub my eyes and feel him sit at the foot of my bed. At the same time I said, "What is it, Dad?" But I didn't get an answer. I sit up as quickly as possible and see no one there. I look back towards the monkey clock, and under a minute has passed. I sprinted out of bed and into the kitchen to find my dad, but the only one there was my mum at the counter, with a now shocked look, with her looking directly at me. I mean, I did just come to her rushing out of my room for no reason. Before she had a chance to ask me anything, I say, "Mum, where's Dad?" Puzzled, she says, "He left at like 6:30, probably at work by now, why?" Obviously, I couldn't tell her why, she'd think I'm nuts. So I just said, "Never mind. Thanks, Mum. I'm going back to bed." For a good while, I forgot about it, but years later, my older sister asked me if I'd ever seen a black figure walking through the house. My heart stopped at the realization that my eyes were not playing tricks on me. Years after, I told my dad, who to this day is a skeptic. He, of course, didn't believe me, and said that just makes me think someone was in the house, which was impossible without my mum knowing. Personally, I believe, and also know he wasn't there to hurt me. Perhaps it was a caring soul that was just passing through, which is why I immediately thought of my dad. Our family was visiting London, and we went to check out the Imperial War Museum. It's got some old planes and tanks which our 2 boys of 6 and 7 at the time wanted to check out. there's a special Holocaust exhibit shown on the 3rd floor of this very large building. Our boys are a bit too young to see it, so I hunker down outside the exhibit with my boys while my husband goes through it. Sitting there trying to keep them entertained, and suddenly my younger says, "Mummy, why is the lady crying?" At first my older son and I didn't hear it, but then pretty soon all three of us are hearing it, and it's weird, like a high keening. Basically it sounds ghostly, and it seems to be coming from the exhibit. My younger son is getting very agitated and says, "This lady won't stop crying." The building is an atrium type, so there is a lot of ambient noise. I convince myself the acoustics are making it sound freaky. There were easily 90 to 100 people in this place, and it's loud. Sounds are bouncing off a lot of hard surfaces, but this crying sifts up to the top. As although not constant, I remember so many years later, and it makes my skin crawl. I'm looking around trying to figure out if other people can hear it, but it's a normal day for everyone else. No one else can hear it. We're all very creeped out at the time. My son says he needs to go to the bathroom. We all jump up thinking the same thing. Let's get away from the sound. We hunt for a bathroom on the 3rd floor and flee to this back office, and someone who works there lets us use their non-public bathroom. And mistake. The hair is standing on the back of my neck. It was dense in that room, and we all felt it. Whatever was there was crazy strong, and it was following us. My sons and I leave the room, that floor, and the building as fast as we could. We ran to the main floor and jetted out of there like we were on fire. My husband comes out looking for us, and when we asked what the hell were the crying sounds coming from the Holocaust exhibit, my husband asks, "What crying?" I said that we heard crying coming from the exhibit, and he says that he didn't hear any crying sounds at all. I don't know. We were just glad to be out of there. I go home and for some reason decide to look up the history of the Imperial War Museum building. Apparently, according to Wiki, the museum was acquired as a permanent home that was previously the Bethlehem Royal Hospital in Southwark. I'm sweating cold bullets now. Bethlehem Royal Hospital. This building served as an insane asylum, with some of the most abhorrent and abusive patient conditions ever recorded, the worst of it lasting over a century. For quite a while, I've been aware of a ghost in my room. I feel a depression on the edge of my bed at night, like someone is sitting down on it. Once it tucked me in. That was the weirdest part, I think. It felt very strange. My Xbox turns on and starts playing Skyrim in the middle of the night. Then there was the picture of me sleeping shot on my phone from an angle that I would not have been able to take it at from myself. The room is always completely locked, doors, windows, everything. At least, it's not an angry ghost. Feels more maternal than anything. Hey guys, it's Mort here, and thank you so much for listening. Here's to hoping you enjoyed tonight's spooks with me. It's always fun to share some good old ghost stories. If you have any stories of your own, you can submit them to my Reddit page or directly to my email address, which are both available in the description. I hope that everyone's doing well, especially my members and patrons whose names can be seen on screen. A huge thanks for your incredible support. And if anyone would like to support me further than just, subscribing and listening and stuff, you can donate a tiny amount of money every month if you'd like to by following the links in the description. That's also pretty cool. Thank you guys. So we will be back on Thursday for probably some feeling woodsy. Maybe, I'm not going to say definitely, but I would like to do woods stories. That'd be pretty cool. Let me know if you are so inclined to agree with me. Deep woods kind of stories, yeah, those are always fun. Hope I've got enough. Alright then guys, let's end things here. Please consider subscribing if you aren't already, because I love you. Stay awesome, and I'll see you in the next one.